Hi Kosu, I'm. What? Where are you? Where are you? You just heard my voice and you all just leave? You're not even gonna try. I mean, you have like 8 pallets at Shack. Not even. Oh, okay. Jokes aside, hi Kosu, I'm Cykosu, and I'm gonna bring up a touchy subject that some people seem to deny the problems of. That is the DC epidemic. Let's talk about it. And just so you stay for the ride, I have a message for the types of players I talk about in this video, so stay tuned if you'd like. For the last couple of years, Dead by Daylight has had the problem of players, more often survivors, leaving matches due to the player deeming them unwinnable or unfair. And you'd think this would be like more late into a match, like if a player has everyone slugged, if they're tunneling someone out, if their teammates are sandbagging them, or throwing the match entirely, but I hate to break it to you, that's not even remotely close. Let's go on a brief history lesson. I use the word brief lightly. August 30th, 2022, Chapter 25, Resident Evil Project W releases. This chapter featured Ada Wong, Rebecca Chambers, and The Mastermind, also known as Albert Wesker. The first true Dash killer that Behavior had released since Blight, who released just 2 years prior, and boy did the community love him. Thus began the, as I like to call it, Wesker boom of Dead by Daylight. If you played Survivor much during this era, you'd remember that just about every other match would be someone playing Wesker. At first, it was fun getting to get proper practice against the new killer, everyone was playing the new survivors, it was a good time, until it started to get old. Every match was someone playing Wesker, which I don't blame them. At the time, he was deemed by many to be the most fun killer Behavior had ever released. And while back then, survivors wouldn't disconnect as often, people weren't very happy, and it did start to pick up a little bit here. Then next was Night. November the same year, a killer who could guard gens very easily, could chase survivors without actually chasing them, which at the time was seen as very mindless, but took a lot of predictability to take full control of, as well as managing what guard was going to be up next. People again weren't super stoked about the Night, but it wasn't as bad. Until that fateful day, March 7th, 2023. The Skull Merchant. Skull Merchant's 1.0 design was admittedly very, very unhealthy for the game. If you don't remember, essentially, her drones were just giant radiuses that would build exposure on the survivors, and getting rid of them would give the Skull Merchant a special form of tracking on you. The player base picked up on how unhealthy this character was immediately as well. Even more so thanks to a certain chess player. And so it began. The tear radius, one gone. A drone spotted, well, your match is pretty much over. If you Kyopius her again, same story. But it was rightfully so. Keep in mind, this was a time when generator kicking perks were at their strongest, and there was no penalty for kicking a generator too many times. It led to matches being held hostage until the server timed out, instantly killing the remaining survivors in the trial, which, if you didn't know, is an entire hour. Skull Merchant players were able to hold matches in basically an endless loop of kicking generator, placing drone, getting drone broken, and then placing another drone, and then kicking the generator again. Just that for an hour, and it was unstoppable. And yes, that was unhealthy, and so a rework for Skull Merchant was released. October 10th the same year, she saw a complete change to her drones. Instead of a radius of exposed buildup, survivors would now have to be scanned 3 times by rotating beams to receive a claw trap, and to, on top of that, become injured or deep wounded, all while the beams could be avoided by crouching, or standing still. The counterplay of pressing the crouch button, or pressing nothing at all. Now this change effectively removed her generator protecting abilities and made her ability to injure so unreliable, and she was essentially made a stealth killer by force, without any ability to expose or pressure objectives, so clearly she shouldn't be an issue anymore. Right? Wait, but you didn't even try. That was your first hook. So yeah, people kept giving up or disconnecting against her. The players who were giving up inflated her kill rate, and 2 versions prior to this rework, bot survivors were added. The first version of bot survivors, which weren't the greatest, which led to the survivors who didn't disconnect struggling to win matches regardless, not to mention the new players who had no idea what she did because her power visually isn't the clearest on what its effects are, and the game has never done anything to really explain to survivor players the different killers. And so Skull Merchant's kill rate kept getting higher, mostly due to players stuck in bias towards a character that simply didn't exist anymore. And then she received more nerfs, with 8.3.0 nerfing her hindered from marking already claw trapped survivors, slowing her down when placing drones and checking her radar, removing one of her scan lines, removing her haste from successfully claw trapping survivors, and giving survivors complete immunity to scan lines when fast vaulting something. One of the few times Skull Merchant could actually force a scan mark. She was now considered to be a total F tier killer, worse than Trapper. It's hard to be worse than Trapper. And yet people still DC against her. People still try to give up. People still argue she can 3-gen so easily, or that she's so punishing, or that her ability simply doesn't work in a game like DBD without putting any thought behind those statements. Skull Merchant's counterplay was as simple as pressing a button and knowing when not to give her information by disarming drones. It's just a simple amount of thought being put into gameplay, so why were survivors still giving up? Past bias. And the player base saw something within that power, so to speak. Then the short-lived Go Next issue arose, in which survivors would just run to a hook or immediately start attempting to unhook themselves and miss skill checks to leave the match as soon as possible, without any punishment for doing so. Didn't like the killer? Go next. Got outplayed? Go next. Using a perk? Go next. Teammate died? Just let yourself go. Fast forward a little bit later, Behavior adds the Abandon feature and adds the Go Next prevention to try and fix the kill rates and make survivors actually play out matches, which got kill switched due to people getting penalized for getting tunneled. But they still kept the removal of survivors being able to unhook themselves, forcing a quicker death, and for a sec, yeah, it was working. Until survivors realized that DC penalties got severely tuned down. And this is the pinpoint of when the worst of the rotting began. Over the next year, survivors began disconnecting for any reason, really. This isn't just with strong killers like Blight, Nurse, Ghoul, or Dracula, this is everywhere. Artist, Unknown, Sadako, Spirit, Xenomorph, killers that have existed for years and years and have never had this issue before, and now suddenly it's an issue? What happened? Nothing has happened to these killers recently except mostly nerfs, so why? Well, I'm assuming that after the events of the killers I listed previously happened, killers who, for the most part, were brand new concepts to the game made the game require more thought to be put into gameplay. This also meant a shift in playstyles on both sides, and with the ever-growing list of survivor perks being added, primarily ones that affect healing speed, exhaustion, or generator progress, hook timers being increased, and pallet tiles increasing, killer players had a lot less pressure available to them. And they started to play a little dirtier, just for the chance of not getting one kill every match. However, all of those dirtier plays are everything the community had previously demonized for the sake of quote-unquote fair gameplay, even though in a lot of cases, it's the only way a killer can secure something. But this is something that becomes more understood when you get more hours in both sides, so if you currently feel like tunneling or slugging are cheap tactics and killers need to just get better, well, the best advice I can give you is to just give it time. You'll figure it out eventually. Now we're at the present. No matter what killer, it feels like every 3 or 4 games, someone will DC. No matter who you play, no matter what side you're on, you'll start to see it. And the penalty for it? It's bugged. You can DC 3 to 4 times before you actually get any stacking punishment. And because the go next prevention is essentially gone forgotten because they messed it up one time, there's no punishment for just running to hooks and having the killer take you out of the match, which once again has no penalty at all. And I find it insane because Survivor's genuinely the strongest it can be right now, with more proposed buffs on the horizon and nothing for killer players to compensate. Because apparently the answer to people uninstalling due to tunneling or slugging isn't giving avenues to educate on how to avoid these scenarios, or making it so killer doesn't have to tunnel or slug for pressure. And it's instead to continue buffing this side for the player base who don't actually care enough about the game to play it properly, let alone learn it in the first place. They have the spoiled brat mentality of being given something and it never being enough. Thus they want more, and this is comprised of both old and new players, and behaviors just giving these kinds of players more care and support than the side that actually wants to play the game and cares about the genuine balance instead of it just being one-sided all the time. Another thing that gets me is the excuses these kinds of players try to bring up too, so allow me to list them and why they don't make any sense. First off, the most common one I see is casual players don't want to go against OP killers in their limited time between work or school. In my opinion, if you know you have limited time and you know your fun is derived from winning without much effort, don't play Dead by Daylight.
I mean, change it up. Maybe you're just tired, you know, or play something else for a week. Try Civilization or something, just for a refreshing change.
Play a single player game. Or something that is actually casual to play, like Fortnite, Crossworlds, or a story game, for all I care. Just don't queue for a game that you aren't gonna want to play if you aren't winning. You just ruin it for everyone else. Just because you're a casual player doesn't mean everyone else is. So why risk having a bad time? Do something else in the small free time you have. Maybe DBD just isn't for you, at least not right now. And while we're on that topic, if you are a self-proclaimed casual player, but you care so much about game balance and winning and what certain killers do, then maybe just sit down for this one. You aren't a casual player, and you know that. Casual players don't think about, let alone focus so heavily on killers or perks or the overall game balance. Casual players hop on, play a few matches, win some, lose some, and hop off. The moment you care so much about winning or losing or killer balance is because you have a competitive mindset. You are playing to win. Now I understand tunneling and slugging for the sake of BMing can be unfun for the actual casual players, and that's why the abandon feature was added. But I do think changes should be made on both sides to make it so tunneling and slugging to BM are punished, while tunneling or slugging for an advantage is still an option. Or just make the right changes to both roles to make it so killers shouldn't have to tunnel or slug flat out. I paid for the game, I can play it however I want. This does not and should never apply to disconnecting from the game. Because guess what? If you queue for a match and you decide you do not want to play the match, you are not playing the game. Not only do you make the match feel less interesting for the killer, but you're also ruining the match for your teammates because of your own selfish attitude. You ruin 4 other players' match. Genuinely, if you have this mindset, stop playing the game. You do not like the game. You only like winning. If you can't handle the idea of losing, you should not play a game where you can. People like you deserve the worst penalties possible. I shouldn't be forced to play against insert blank here. Unless it's something that's genuinely unplayably bugged or broken, as an example, Skull Merchant 1.0, this excuse holds no strength. You queued up for a match against other players on a random map to play against whatever they're playing. You do not pick and choose your matches, no one does, and you're not going to get better at the game if you don't play it. However, I do think there are valid excuses for disconnecting as well, such as this killer or map has visual effects that give me headaches, makes me feel nauseous, or could put my health at risk. This one's okay because it's for your own well-being and not for being selfish. I had an emergency and I had to leave. Well, obviously, if something is so important that you need to leave immediately, it's perfectly fine to do so. The ping was too high or my game was lagging really bad are both completely fine reasons to disconnect. The amount of VPNers or just unoptimized sections of the game allow completely valid reasons for people to need to disconnect or for the health of their PC, and also smoother gameplay. These are all reasons that are okay to disconnect for. However, if you're just DCing because you think you're not going to win, or because your build didn't work, or because, well, let's face it, you're entitled, you should really genuinely play a different game for a bit. You're burnt out. Not playing Dead by Daylight is completely okay. Everything that's here now will still be here later, and if you're not satisfied with the balance of the game, figure out what exactly you dislike and put it on the forums. I notice a lot of people disconnect against killers who have more interesting parts of their kit, which usually lead to different forms of counterplay, which is difficult to adjust to for some people. A lot of people, apparently. But still. Killers are getting more and more unique, and players aren't taking enough time to assess what they're doing wrong and blame it on the killer side being overpowered. But in reality, killers are just more interesting than they used to be. And I've realized something. A large chunk of the player base is stuck in a mindset for a game that does not exist anymore. Think about how killers from before, let's say twins, were like. Most killers up until that point were just rehashed ideas for ranged attacks or M1s, with only a couple outliers having something a little more unique. And then Twins comes out. The first killer to have 2 bodies they can control. And then Trickster, the first killer with recoil and a flurry style power with an ultimate style ability for hitting blades. Then Nemesis, the first killer to have multiple entities in the trial that aren't the killer. Pinhead, who introduced a secondary objective that was genuinely mandatory. Cykosu, who had, well, a lot. Dredge, who could interact with and teleport across lockers. Wesker, who could throw and slam survivors into walls. Knight, who could manually control paths for guards to follow. Singularity, who could observe survivors from afar. Xenomorph, who had another secondary objective that could take out the killer's power. Chucky, who was the first killer to be shorter than most tiles. Unknown, who was the first explosion-based projectile killer. Vecna, who had 4 different powers in one killer. Dracula, who had the ability to transform. Houndmaster, who could send another entity to grab and hold survivors. Ghoul, who has a grappling hook-based ability that can be used to injure survivors and leap around tiles to get downs. And Crossu, who has a secondary objective, multiple forms, a ranged ability, and a lunge attack. Killer concepts have evolved since Blight, and while none of them have come close to being as strong as him, they're still objectively more creative than any of the killers made prior, and it's starting to show that survivors don't know what to do against a lot of them. I have a few ideas to propose, so let's start with fixing the issue I just brought up. But before we do, YouTube is telling me that only 2% of you folk are subscribed. So if you want more content about the game health and my thoughts about it, or ghoul related videos, hit the subscribe button. I'll make it worth your time, I promise, and while we're at it, also check out my Twitch. That's where I do most of my content, and I'd appreciate it if you all check me out over there too. Moving on. The tutorial / onboarding rework. Dead by Daylight's tutorial is not the most educating when it comes to actual gameplay. All it teaches for survivors is how to do gens, how to heal, how to unhook, and how to escape through either the gate or the hatch, with a little bit dedicated to the anti-face camping mechanic. And then it throws you into a match against a bot killer. Trapper. To be specific, the most non-power killer that exists. What the tutorial fails to mention throughout it is perks, items, add-ons, offerings, different status effects, and any killer besides Trapper as a whole. So what do I suggest? Well, let's rework the tutorial to open to the player the moment they open the game, instead of being a button that has to be manually pressed. Showcase the basic gameplay as you do now, but also highlight side objectives like totems and what they can do, highlight different tiles, palettes, and windows, and advise survivors how they should use them and how to remember it's a team-based game, palettes are a limited resource, and it's okay not to drop some. Throughout the tutorial, the player should then be able to pick one of the starting killers or survivors and teach them about perks by giving them that character's perks throughout the tutorial. Bonus points if the player gets a free 10 levels on that character so they can start with that character's adept perks. After they complete the gameplay tutorial, give the new players a tour guide through the different menus, describing the loadouts, the blood web, the shrine, and the store, as well as what the currencies are for. Then rework the perks menu to have them organized into what they're used for. Survivors would have some like second chance, boons, healing, or item categories, and killers would have some like generators, hexes, exposure, or blocking categories. And this tutorial needs to be mandatory. New players need to be told what the game is like in a more advanced manner, so that they can understand how to play against more ranges of killers and how to work with more ranges of survivors. And lastly, this part doesn't need to be mandatory, but Dead by Daylight should have in-game video-based guides for survivors to deal with different killers. Maybe Behavior could look for groups of mains of each killer to get ideas and information to share about what hurts killers the most. Who knows? It'd be nice. They should be able to do this for groups of people who main certain killers so that those players can tell survivors what to do against them, what hurts them the most in their own gameplay so that survivors can use that. I imagine this would be done in a beginner, intermediate, and advanced format. The further you progress and get better at the game, the more information you can understand, and the sooner, the better. And now, the meat of what would fix this issue, in my eyes. A rework to disconnect penalties and the timeout system entirely. This is called the karma system, alternatively called the entity's favor. To start, 3 tiers from best to worst: enlightened, observed, and forgotten. Enlightened is the same as usual, except for a few key differences. Every DC penalty is 1 minute and 30 seconds, and upon rank reset, you receive 2,000 iridescent shards. Observed now gives players a warning saying they are getting close to being forgotten. Every DC penalty is now 5 minutes, and upon rank reset, no reward is given. And forgotten, the lowest of the low, the worst of the worst. Players can no longer queue in normal matches and are forced to play 5 to 8 matches against bots before being allowed back in observed. And of course, no reward on the rank reset. Now, what would count as DCs or give-ups? Well, DCs would be simple disconnects, not including abandons. However, I do think the abandon on getting slugged after being healed should be removed. That is an awful reason to be able to abandon a match. Give-ups would require any of the following: the game tracking a survivor standing next to a hook for a long time before dying, the game tracking the survivor running to the killer immediately after every unhook, the game tracking the survivor moving very minimally or AFKing throughout the match, or reports of unsportsmanlike behavior, which would have to be manually looked at by a real person and not by a robot, please. None of the if you die in 2 minutes you get a penalty point garbage, because that clearly won't work and isn't clear on if they got hard tunneled as a lower MMR player or if they were genuinely giving up. The checks for giving up need to be specific. Now, a big question: how would this affect friendly matches? Well, in most equal friendly matches, the survivors get to death hook but escape before dying, and these requirements are specifically for the survivors dying. I also believe there could be a clause where if the survivors die to the endgame collapse, the previous checks are invalidated, but who knows if this could be abused. Alternatively, there could be a button players could press at the end to mark a match as a friendly match. This would be similar to how other games have a forfeit button where a majority of players have to agree on it, but relying on other players to do something is apparently too much to ask, so this probably wouldn't work anyway. On the opposite side, there could be ways to regain favor points for playing a certain amount of matches, or for the give props feature that currently is entirely unused. Let's say 5 to 6 matches played without disconnecting or giving up would be a removed penalty point, and every 2 props would remove a penalty point as well. My thought process behind this is Well, for one, how to make DCing and giving up look as unappealing as possible while making continuous play and learning more rewarding. If a player cannot handle playing against things other players do, or other mindsets other players have, such as wanting to win or wanting to pressure the other side, they simply shouldn't have to. So that's why I suggest the player who reaches the forgotten tier should be forced to play a few matches with bots instead. And yes, before you ask, the tiers are based on each side. Both sides get the same penalties. You will not be forced to play against bots on Killer if you DC'd 8 times on Survivor, and vice versa. You cannot cheap out by facing bots on the opposite side to remove your penalty point. I want to reiterate that this resets completely on rank reset. Regardless of what tier you are, you get moved up to the Enlightened tier on the 13th of every month. However, I personally believe if a player account reaches Forgotten 3 months in a row, it should issue a longer ban. I brought up this sort of idea, however less finished, on Twitter, and I want to use this chance to answer other questions people had over there. Why not go for the bots and deal with them? It's a free kill. Bots are unfun to face on any killer, since they always know how to react to powers in time and cannot be mind-gamed. Most bot chases are boring and end up just being M1 chases, and besides, have you ever had a good time with a bot on your team? Would players in a team be able to give each other good karma? No. Do you really think behavior would give us that many iridescent shards out at once? No comment. How would the system affect people who disconnect for the sake of disability or problems facing certain killers? In an ideal world, there would be a phobia settings, accessibility settings that make these issues no longer present, or at least minimized. However, I could see there being a penalty point appealing system made for these types of problems too, but that could also be abused as well by people who don't actually have accessibility problems, which could cause distrust in those appeals. Wouldn't forcing players to play against bots push them away from the game? If this system pushes players who disconnect 8 times in the span of 1 month away from the game, then yes, these are the types of players actively killing the game and making it unfun, not just for players, but for their own teammates. I have no respect for these players and do not believe they should keep playing a game they clearly do not enjoy playing, let alone the types of balance takes these players have. The players who have the strength to continue playing despite losing the ability to leave the moment anything goes wrong at all will continue to get better at playing and realize their issues before were their own fault. The players who leave because of this were never meant for this game in the first place. This change would shave off the chunk of players that cause harm to the game's balance and the dev's feedback. I see this as a good thing. And lastly, for this section, if a player was detected to be cheating, any disconnects recorded in their matches will have the penalty point for that match removed. Another thing I'd like to see put in place is, well, first, a complete rebalance to all of the meta perks on both sides to make it so slugging and tunneling aren't needed, and so that second chance perks, exhaustion, and, well, the blight aren't as oppressive and meta as they are right now. And now I know there's some of you who like to deny the fact that the DC epidemic even exists and that people are blowing this completely out of proportion, and to that I say, really helped me develop and prevent myself from falling into like same face syndrome. It's Cykosu.
Yeah. Oh. Wow. Really?
Okay, I'm gonna go this way.
Well, guess he's not based for playing Gabriel anymore.
He's not even a cutie.
This Sadako is trying to red light mind game me over a loop that I can see her over.
Yeah. Nice. And thread that fucking needle. Hi there. Dang. That sucks. Doo-doo-doo. Ah! DC'd. Ah! Double DC'd! Get shit on.
Incredible cinema.
Are you serious?
Cinema, bro. Oh, weird bug.
Watch it. They're gonna be like hyper survivors. These are about to be the most insane. Oh my god! Already, Yoshi? It's been 15 minutes. They DC'd on TR.
And then we would pick the same number. And then probably the same reasoning for that number. I have fucking tears in my eyes.
There you go.
All three of them? Dude.
That's the most story.
It's a nurse. Oh my goodness. Oh shit, what a blink. Brother.
It sucks. It's my doing. I did it. I got it into the game. I did it. Make the money. Make the money. Okay.
I think I heard someone on the Genevieve. 2 DCs? Pure fucking shit. Fuck you, bot! Let's go! Give me one more! Give me one more, god damn it! Dude, the PvE mode in this game is sick. Do it. Do it now. Thank God.
The way, I really don't like it. Okay, Saga doesn't like it either. Okay, Ace doesn't like it either. Bro, honestly, like, can I just... okay, V doesn't like it either. Like, I can just DC, no? Like, there's no penalty, right? Like, I can just leave. Clearly, these guys are DCing as if they have the... Okay, well, yeah, good job. Cool. What a... Good match, guys. GG's. Die. Yeah, okay, my bad. Yep, yeah, I agree. I should die. That's on me. Honestly, I shouldn't even have queued up.
As you can see, it's not just for the strong killers or tunneling, it's at any sign of a negative effect impacting their gameplay. And it needs to stop. Not only do I have the video proof of this being an issue, but I also have official stats from the game devs themselves. I briefly mentioned this in my Ghoul Has Counterplay video, but Behavior recently gave us a lot of stats, given to us from the Japanese account. From September last year to August this year, the escape rates in Japan servers specifically compared to worldwide servers were a good bit higher than the escape rates outside of Japan. And I personally want to believe that this is mostly due to Japan players actually wanting to get better at the game and caring about the general gameplay instead of acting like they're entitled to every win. And this is backed up by the fact that if you play in Japan servers by using something like exit lag, you can notice a significant lack of disconnects in your matches. And if you don't have exit lag, then I give a shout out to Revium. He plays in Japan servers often specifically to avoid disconnects in his matches. You can even tell by the gameplay of the other players in those matches that they really care about what they're doing and put an effort to try and reverse the match. And I think a lot of us on both sides could learn from that. But if Behavior keeps catering to these players, it's only going to push the players who actually care about the game and want to play the matches they queue up for away. And no matter how many buffs they make to Survivor or nerfs they make to Killer, these players are still going to disconnect because they do not have the capacity to understand that not every match should be their match. If we keep on this path of buffing survivors and wondering why they are still leaving, we're going to completely ruin the future of updates and balance this game could have to make it feel actually nice and fair to play our matches. Should these kinds of changes were to go through, not only would it weed out the players that abuse the current disconnect system to only win matches, it also has the potential of bringing back the players who left because they couldn't have a match without either their teammate or opponents just leaving at the slightest inconvenience. Ideally, all of these changes would be done with a rework of the MMR system so that the players who aren't experienced go against other similarly unexperienced players so that they can learn at their own paces on top of the new tutorial system. And for those of you who still plan on disconnecting the moment anything goes wrong and for some reason challenged yourselves to get to this point in the video, hear me out. Dead by Daylight is a player versus player game. Both sides likely plan on playing efficiently and using what they can to secure a win. That's just natural competitive nature. The DBD as a party game argument stopped working the moment MMR was put in place. There's nothing wrong with being a casual player, but you cannot complain when someone isn't playing casual. There's an estimate of about 700,000 to even 1 million players on at a time on all platforms, possibly even more. You can't expect everyone to play how you want. That's never been how it works. DBD has been a game where if the right plays are made, it can flip to either side at any moment. Don't give up immediately. Endure and keep trying. It's okay to lose some as long as you're getting better at winning. Understanding is power. And that right there is my message for the players I mentioned in this video that I said I had for the end of the video. So if you made it this far through, I appreciate you. Thank you for watching. With that, I will close this video, and if you haven't already, remember to subscribe, check out my Twitch. I'd love to discuss more in a civil manner. My goal is to help players be better and look towards a brighter future with the game. That's all. Thank you for watching, I am Cykosu, and goodbye, Kosu.